Welcome to my channel.
Facts about Philippines movies. Early Philippine cinema and iconic films. Philippine cinema has a long history, dating back to the late 19th century. The first Filipino feature film, Dalagang Bukid 1919, was directed by Jose Nepomuceno. Noli Me Tangere 1930 is one of the earliest film adaptations of Jose Rizal's novel. Manila, Saimgie Kuko en Liwanag, 1975, directed by Lino Broca, is a critically acclaimed film known for its social commentary. Himala, 1982, directed by Ishmael Brenal, is a powerful drama starring Nora Honor. The Metro Manila Film Festival MMFF is one of the most prominent film festivals in the Philippines. Four Sisters and a Wedding 2013 is a popular Filipino comedy drama. Tanning Yaman 2000 explores themes of family, wealth, and values. Magnifico 2003 is a heartwarming drama set in rural Philippines. The Filipino Academy of Movie Arts and Sciences Awards is one of the major film award giving bodies in Philippines. Film Awards and Honors. Filipino actors like Nora Honor and Fernando Poe Jr. have achieved international recognition. Taiwumb 2012, directed by Brillante Mendoza, was screened in the main competition at the Venice Film Festival. Sakaling Hindi Marker Rating 2016 is an independent Filipino film that gained critical acclaim. The House of Us 2018 is a popular romantic drama that stars Catherine Bernardo and Daniel Padilla. Birdshot 2016 is a Filipino crime thriller that won multiple awards at international film festivals. General Luna 2015 is a historical biopic about General Antonio Luna. Philippine cinema often explores issues of poverty, social inequality, and political unrest. Kita Kita 2017 is a romantic comedy that gained popularity in the Philippines. The Cinemalaya Independent Film Festival is a showcase of independent Filipino films. On the Job 2013 is a crime thriller that delves into corruption and politics. Cultural influence and trends. Philippine cinema often reflects Filipino culture, tradition, and societal values. My Ex and Vice 2017 is a romantic comedy exploring themes of love and forgiveness. Ang Larawan 2017 is a musical drama based on a classic Filipino play. Babai Sa Septic Tank 2011 is a satirical comedy that parodies the makes of indie films. Filipino horror films like Feng Shui 2004 often incorporate supernatural elements. Metro Manila 2013 is a crime thriller that addresses issues of poverty and urban life. The Philippines has a thriving indie film scenes with filmmakers like Love Diaz and Eric Mati. Anak 2000 is a drama about the struggling of an overseas Filipino worker. On the Wings of Love 2015 is a popular Filipino television drama series. The Cinema One Originals Film Festival showcases innovative and experimental Filipino films. Industry and technology. The Philippines has a growing film exhibition industry with theaters nationwide. The University of Philippines Film Institute is a notable institution for training filmmakers. Filipino cinema has embraced digital filmmaking and special effects technology. Filipino actors often cross over into music, television, and international cinema. Streaming services have made Filipino films more accessible to a global audience. Mano Po 2002 is a series of Filipino films that explores Chinese Filipino culture. The Film Development Council of the Philippines supports the local film industry. The Philippines has a strong presence at international film festivals. Philippine cinema often addresses contemporary issues including social and political topics. The future of Philippine cinema is promising with increasing recognition on a global stage. Cultural impact and future. Philippine cinema has influenced global understanding of Filipino culture and society. Miss Granny 2018 is a comedy drama about a grandmother who magically regains her youth. Filipino films often emphasize family values, resilience, and community. The influence of Philippine cinema extends to international film movements. Kita Kita 2017 and other films have contributed to the popularity of Philippine romantic comedies. General Luna 2015 and Goyo The Boy General 2018 have brought attention to Philippine history. Filipino films often addresses issues of migration, identity, and cultural diversity. The Philippines continues to produce unique and innovative films that resonate with audiences worldwide. The future of Philippine cinema is bright with its ability to inspire and challenge audience with diverse storytelling.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.